and we don't want to be in this system anymore. And so we need to keep our wealth in form of gold rather than having the cash, which will be deducted by hidden tax in form of inflation.
Correct.
But the gold is limited.
Right.
The people on earth, everybody is like a target to be like a slave in forms of money. So it's like a, what should I say? It's like a game now. Like people who realize can go to secure my wealth to exchange the real wealth. But everybody cannot do it, right? Because it's limited, and the cash flow that we have or the number in our system is bigger than actual wealth. So is it just people who realize will win and who don't will be lose?
Well,
like the crisis that we are facing now is so big, and everybody cannot be saved.
Right. But we got to keep trying. I think the phenomenon you're thinking of here is Dr. Chris Martenson says, what is it? He says, people can't get out of the way of what they don't know is coming. So the more we try to tell people, hey, like, be aware of how these systems work, we're helping to warn them. So, you can only do so much. You can, I think you've talked before when people are like, well, what do you expect us to do? And it's like, that's not really the answer here. In my mind, the answer is being aware is the most important thing, because the more people we make aware, they'll do whatever they do. And let's be clear, gold is not like the magic bullet in all of this. It's not perfect. I'm not saying any of this is perfect, but when people are aware, like, gold may not be the answer for all people. This is why I say money, what we have come to view as money in the past is going to be, there is a collision coming between the financialized system that we have been dealing with all of our lives and the real world in terms of commodities, oil, gold, land, because much like in the oligarchs in the Soviet system in Russia, there comes a certain point where the face value of the money is so disconnected from the real world and the real economy that it really becomes just absurd. That's really what hyperinflation is absurdity. It's Weimar Germany. It's like, I make money in the morning and I have to get it spent by noon, or it's worth nothing by the end of the day. You're living in an absurd system. It's no longer rational. I really can't just create money that has no relation to the real world. That's the key point, because anytime we see the medium of exchange, i.e. money, attenuated or not related in any way to reality, that is when hell breaks loose in a society, because nobody can make transactions anymore. The bedrock of all commerce is trust. This is why conceptually it's so important. It's really not about the gold. It's about honesty in the financial system.
Oh, so it's all about trust and how we become honest.
Right.
It's like
we're printing money and we send it to Ukraine. Okay. And
the reason why United States is so strong it's because the world mostly pay with US dollar. It's like the center of.
That's a part of it, but actually it goes a little deeper than this. The reason the United States is so strong is because we have been living off the prosperity of the 1800s. And let me explain what I'm talking about. Okay, there's a book called Tragedy and Hope by a guy named Carroll Quigley. It's super long book in the form of the Federal Reserve. And this is of key importance here. And communism. Understand, those are part of the same dialectic. Karl Marx wrote a book called Das Kapital. He wrote that for a reason. Capitalism and communism are part of, in my opinion, a false dialectic. What people, especially in America, call capitalism, what we think of in our minds as capitalism, is actually the free enterprise system that existed in the 1800s in America. What occurred as the free enterprise system got bigger, a group of financial elites essentially got together and hijacked it and created this capitalist system. The capitalist system, through a system called interlocking directorships and consolidation of pools of capital, ended up in the same posture as the communist system.
Because both are dictated?
Effectively. You have commissars in the communist system, which is dictated through a command economy, which they proved didn't really work. But when you allowed capital to accrue voluntarily through the free enterprise system, and then you hijack it into the capitalist system, where that capital is now controlled through corporations, where the corporations' boards of directors are all interlocked and they're all working together, you end up with the same outcome as you would in a communist system. It just came about through voluntary transactions rather than involuntary transactions in a command economy. But it results in effectively the same thing. They're both, there is communism and that form of capitalism, which is always what ends up happening, are all the result of financialism through central banking. That's the name of the game. That's how they can, in effect, they can transmute one into effectively the other. Now, it occurs over a longer period of time. It provides more life over your own financial well-being because it ends up taking you from what looks like a free enterprise system through a long process, and then we end up in what amounts to a totalitarian system. Some more prosperity, at least in the short term. And never forget, Mikhail Gorbachev, when the Soviet Union fell, said, they'll tell you communism is dead. Do not believe it. We are going into the mixed system. What we are seeing now is the attempt to do precisely that. Move us into this mixed system where, much like China, where people will say, you know, oh, it's not communist, it's capitalist now. Well, no, it's Dengism. Deng Xiaoping came in and created this hybridized system, which I believe is what many of these so-called elites want to see around the world, which is, oh, you have the choice of where you go to work, or you have the choice between Coke and Pepsi, or you have the choice between Colgate and Crest toothpaste. But at the end of the day, you still end up with social credit score, digital money, no control over your own, but it feels like free choice.
So is this like this? This communism is a simple communism, but this one is
the same, yeah.
But the whole.
But keep in mind, when it's Coke versus Pepsi, you got people focused on Coke and Pepsi,
right? Or
Ford versus Chevy, or whatever. But you're still ultimately the upper level shareholders, or the company owners. Yeah. So but when they're focused on, is it that one or that one? It's going to be one of those two. You will own both.
There's a book called Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. It's by a guy named Anthony Sutton, where he talks about Wall Street helped create communism in the Soviet Union. In fact, you could argue they did do it. They fully created it. This is the point I'm trying to make, because I know a lot of people use the word capitalist, and I know what they mean. They mean free enterprise. But the term capitalist is a Marxist term. The title of one of his books is Capital, Das Kapital. This is part of this dialectic. And you can end up in capitalism under just as much financial totalitarianism as you can under communism. It just happens over a longer period of time, and it occurs under a certain kind of subterfuge that makes people think they're voluntarily engaging in these transactions, when in reality, they're being sort of herded into an increasingly totalitarian system as time goes on.
Fascism.
That's like just like what we recently saw a movie. It's called Jones Plantation.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Like people who are slaves, they think that they are voting for their freedom, but the choice that they get always ends up same situation, or like they feel like they finally had the freedom, a fake monetary system. So
well, and then
yeah,
and that is, how do I put it? It's in a way it's the most honest because it's based on this. It's something that just exists in its own right. It's not conceptualized. It has no what we call counterparty risk. It's not like a bond, like a treasury bond is the government truly attached to this and it's honest. Then if you want this, you go get it. And that honesty keeps the whole economy honest. That's why gold is so important in and of itself, but it's also why you have to understand the sort of esoteric or concept behind the gold is more important than the gold itself, is all I'm trying to say. And as I say, money. They don't want them to think about how it's created. They don't want people to think about how you use it. They don't want people to think about the basis for it. Because if people think about it too hard, they'll realize that they've been pulled into the same trap you're talking about. Remember, I remember reading something, it was symbolic of a third party intervening between our transaction. They put a wedge in between the two parties. And by placing yourself in between those two parties and becoming a middleman, you can manipulate them. That's like, do you know the root word of the word media? Media means middleman, middle, medium, something in between you and I. There's a medium of exchange. The very creation of money in and of itself created an opportunity for manipulation of other people's transactions by another party. Just the creation of money itself allows for the manipulation of transactions between parties. Right. What gold does is it mitigates, it lessens the amount of manipulation that they can get away with between those two parties.
I see.
Banking itself has pulled more people out of poverty than probably any other function out there. But where it becomes a problem is where greed...
For people who want to get out of the system.
I don't think that there's any magic bullet. I think you need to assess where you're at. So like, for example, a little Bitcoin. I'm not as... I'm kind of a Bitcoin agnostic, like I for it being useful. So Bitcoin has some